fellow citizens of Nigeria at home and in the diaspora, let me begin by wishing you all a happy 61st Independence Anniversary once again. Thank you. More than 6 decades ago, as our nation's founding fathers walked the long road to independence, they were under no illusions about the challenges of forging a nation from one of the most diverse groups of people on earth. Even as they took great strides in negotiating the terms of nationhood, they recognized that independence was only the beginning of the difficult but not impossible task of nation building. They understood that as momentous as the attainment of independence was for Nigeria, the fight for freedom was not yet won until every Nigerian citizen could stake a claim to the Nigerian nation. At the 1958 Lancaster House Conference, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, for instance, said to the Assembly of Nigeria and British representatives, independence for Nigeria in 1960 is imperative, but independence for Nigeria as a corporate entity is not enough. The peoples of Nigeria must at the same time be guaranteed their freedom. We must ensure that in an independent Nigeria, individual citizens throughout the land enjoy liberty, human dignity, and equality under the law. There must be one Nigeria with one constitution and one law for all. On October 1, 1960, Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, while delivering his Independence Day address, described himself not by the magnificence of the high office he occupied as Prime Minister of the most populous black nation in the world, but he described himself as a citizen. By so doing, he identified with the Nigerian people he had been elected to serve. In his speech, the Prime Minister stated, "Words cannot adequately express my joy and pride at being the Nigerian citizen privileged to accept from our Royal Highness these constitutional instruments which are the symbol of Nigeria's independence. It's a unique privilege which I shall remember forever, and it gives me strength and courage as I dedicate my life to the service of our country." On November 16, which happened to be his birthday, in his inaugural address as Nigeria's first indigenous Governor General, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe warned the newly independent nation of the dangers of elevating power above institutions and the rule of law. In his legendary address titled "Respect for Dignity of Man," the great Zeke said, "Without respect for the rule of law permeating our political fabric, Nigeria will degenerate into a dictatorship with its twin relatives of tyranny and despotism. I hold that the arbitrary exercise of power without the restraining influence of the rule of law must be condemned as a fundamental departure from constitutional government. Any justification of such untrammeled exercise of political power is, to me, an outrage on human conscience and a gross violation of human rights. In recognition of this right to individual freedoms under the rule of law, irrespective of the diversity of persuasions, the Premier of Northern Nigeria, the Sultan of Sokoto, Sir Ahmadu Bello, said to the peoples of Northern Nigeria in a unifying message, subject to the overriding need to preserve law and order, it is our determination that everyone should have absolute liberty to practice his belief according to the dictates of his conscience. Admittedly, these founding patriots were far from perfect. Their human fallibilities were evident in some of their actions and inactions. Nevertheless, their legacies of selfless service to their people have not been matched by subsequent generations of Nigerian leaders. Having played their roles in the making of the Nigerian nation, with some tragically losing their lives in the process, our founding patriots bequeathed Nigeria to Nigerians in the hope that each generation will build, in a manner of speaking, a more perfect union. Nigeria on trial, a gray cloud of witnesses. Fellow citizens of Nigeria, lend me your imaginations for a moment. Imagine that the court of heaven is seated to hear a historic case on Nigeria, as it happened in the book of Daniel, that a court sat in heaven. And the presiding judge is none other than the Almighty himself. Imagine that this court is presented with reports on the current state of the nation, and our founding fathers are called upon, one after the other, as expert witnesses to audit the nation we have built on the foundation of their labors. What will their testimonies be regarding Nigeria of today? What was Sir Ahmadu Bello? He was a passionate educationist, an advocate of girl-child education. What would he say of northern Nigeria, where over 1,000 students, boys and girls inclusive, have been kidnapped from their schools in 6 northern states since December 2020? What would the Sadano say to the report that young people in northern Nigeria are turning to armed banditry as a vocation, with around 30,000 armed bandits spread over 100 camps across the north and raining down terror on fellow citizens? What would the late premier say to the fact that nearly 350,000 people in the northeast, including 300,000 children, have been killed in 12 years by the Boko Haram terrorist group, while there are currently 1.9 million people displaced from their homes, of which 60% are children? What would his response be to the evidence that, despite the efforts of our gallant soldiers and the news of insurgents surrendering to the Nigerian troops, the terrorists are winning hearts and minds and are recruiting massively among despondent villagers who have lost confidence in the Nigerian state? Would a witness be in contempt of court if he lost his dignified composure, seeing that his dream for northern Nigeria has become a nightmare? Or would he wonder and be asking questions if there is no government in power in Nigeria today to checkmate the evils presently plaguing the country? As you reflect on this solemn image, picture also the Owele of Onitsha, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, in the witness box of this historic court poring over recent records on Nigeria. What would the Zeke of Africa say to the report that every Monday, the Southeast, including his beloved Onitsha, shuts down as people comply with the sit-at-home order of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB? What would this founding father say to the report that on Independence Day 2021, in compliance with threats from IPOB, the people of the Southeast could not freely salute the Nigerian flag? What would he say to reports of brutal attacks on hard and soft targets by the Eastern Security Network, ESN, even as the Nigerian state continues to clamp down ruthlessly on the group? What would the response of the great nationalists be to indications that almost 6 decades after the Nigerian Civil War, memories of the war continue to echo, not just in people's life experiences, but also in distressing utterances by political leaders, while genuine reconciliation remains a mirage. Would this national icon be in error if he felt for a moment that his lifetime labor to build a Nigerian nation may have been in vain? As you keep that in mind, think of Chief Obafemi Awolowo in the witness box as an expert witness, assessing the happenings in the states of the Southwest, the legacy zone of the former Western region. What will he say to reports that the people of the Southwest, just like those in the Middle Belt, the South-South, and the Southeast, have become vulnerable to criminals and marauding gunmen who kidnap, kill, maim, rape, and pillage communities? What would the late sage say to the report? That not only has the Nigerian state been unable to protect the vulnerable, but also that the subnational governance structures have largely been helpless as non-state actors attempt to destabilize the region. What would he say to the report? That frustrated at the state of the nation, some Nigerians of Yoruba descent have teamed up with other aggrieved Nigerians to take in their grievances in protest before the Community of Nations at the United Nations General Assembly that just concluded recently. Would the sagacity of the sage diminish in significance if you broke down in lamentation over the region and nation that he labored tirelessly over in his lifetime? The verdict on our stewardship. Fellow Nigerians, a critical point of national reflection in this season of our 61st independence anniversary is the quality of our stewardship of the nation that we inherited from our founding patriots. What does he say about our stewardship when more than 60 years after the discovery of oil in Nigeria, at a time that the world is moving on from oil and embracing renewable energy, we are still bickering over what paltry percentage should be allocated from oil revenue to oil-bearing host communities? What is our progress scorecard when the era of the fourth industrial revolution, our policy debates are still around reopening cattle grazing routes and sustaining an archaic practice that has claimed numerous lives and left many homeless across the nation? What lessons have we learned when over 60 years after our founding fathers almost sacrificed the prospects of nationhood on the altar of sectional politics, we are still caught up in the squabbles over which part of Nigeria the next president will come from? Indeed, we forget that in our national history, there has been no correlation between the number of years a region has produced a president or head of state and the level of development of that region or geopolitical zone. If there were any correlation between the part of the country that produces the president and the level of development of that region, the northern part of Nigeria will be the most developed region in Nigeria today, having produced heads of state and presidents for over 40 out of 61 years since independence. Instead, despite the historical dominance of the North in the governance of this nation, data from the World Bank indicates that as of 2016, the North accounted for 87% of the poverty in Nigeria. That's a place to say shame. Furthermore, based on a report by the International Center for Investigative Reporting, the facts indicate that the North has dominated key appointments in the 6 years of the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. Despite this preponderance of appointments from the north, data from the Nigeria Living Standards Survey shows that the north has continued to dominate the poverty end count in Nigeria even during the Buhari administration. If there were any correlation between where a president comes from and the level of development of his region, the administration of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan would have resolved the restructuring, resource management, and environmental degradation related crisis of the Niger Delta, as well as the developmental aspirations of the Southeast. If there were any correlation between where a president comes from and the development of his region, the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo would not have resulted in the marginalization of the Southwest or the freezing of the allocations of Lagos State by its administration. While inclusiveness is integral to achieving national integration, we have merely majored in minors in our approach to political inclusion, and we have minored in majors. The problem with Nigeria is not that some ethnic groups have not produced a president. The problem with Nigeria is that we have failed to heed the admonitions of our founding fathers, the likes of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who challenged us in his Lancaster House address to move beyond the independence of the country to freedom for the peoples and citizens of Nigeria. The result of this failure on our part as a nation is a governance structure that has kept the diverse peoples of Nigeria excessively dependent on the central government. Can you imagine for a moment what the verdict of our founding fathers will be before the court of heaven today? I have no doubt that they all, with pinpoint accuracy, would declare before God that the succeeding generations of leaders have unwittingly removed and replaced the ancient landmark they unanimously set, thus acting in gross violation of the very basis of our union, and worse still, in flagrant disregard for the word of God. The Bible states expressly in Proverbs 22:28, do not remove the ancient landmark which your fathers have set. As if Moses, the lawgiver and deliverer of Israel from Egypt, had Nigeria's amalgamation in 1914 in mind, he also wrote in Deuteronomy 19:14, you shall not remove your neighbor's landmark, which the men of old have set in your inheritance, which you will inherit in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess. This law was subsequently inscribed on stones, along with the attendant consequences of the violation thereof, in Deuteronomy 27:17. He reads, and I quote, cursed is the one who moves his neighbor's landmark. If only the people insisting on the 1999 Constitution as amended, if only the people insisting that that Constitution should remain the ground norm for Nigeria were aware of the consequences of the curse they are attracting to themselves and their descendants after them, they will all repent and be at the forefront of the campaign for constitutional re-engineering and reset. Alas, they are none the wiser. This is a great pity. And if they remain hell-bent on a destructive path, here is the word of God to the arrogant princes of Judah who did likewise in the past. The Bible says in Hosea chapter 5, verse number 10, the princes of Judah are like those who remove a landmark. I will pour out my wrath on them like water. If you care to know, the 1999 Constitution as amended was imposed upon the nation by the military and has completely removed the ancient landmarks set by our founding fathers in the 1960 Independence Constitution and the subsequent 1963 Republican Constitution, respectively. This is where the rain started beating us afresh as a nation. For every contractual agreement, the parties are required to sign a document validating the terms and conditions and the recognition of the law. In the case of Nigeria, our founding fathers, in effect, signed a contract in 1960 detailing the terms and conditions of our union, or unity, if you like, following a series of negotiations. This contract was then updated in 1963 following due consultations. As for the 1999 Constitution, while it opens with the preamble, we the people, I'm here to let you know that we the people of Nigeria were neither duly consulted, nor did we accept the conditions under which we are now being governed. How then can anyone, any leader, hypocritically insist that our unity is not negotiable? Did we not negotiate it in 1960? Did we not negotiate it in 1963? Did our founding fathers not negotiate? Truth be told, the majority of the champions, promoters, and supporters of the "Our Unity is not negotiable" slogan pay lip service to a version of unity that serves their selfish interests. What they are insisting on, in reality, is our disunity is not negotiable, and that we must be forced to live together irrespective of the inherent dysfunctionality of the terms and conditions. The continued insistence on altering the set rules in the midst of a spirited game of national development and the subsequent imposition of a draconian and lopsided concoction of a constitution in 1999 is the most inhibiting, corrosive spanner thrown into the wheel of our national unity, faith, peace, and progress from that time until now. I am fully persuaded, as are many fellow compatriots within and outside of the shores of Nigeria, that the 1999 Constitution, whether as amended or to be further amended by the National Assembly, is nothing more than a glorified death certificate. At this juncture, let us borrow a leaf from recent world history. Once upon a time, the Berlin Wall separated Eastern Germany from Western Germany until President Ronald Reagan, in his indomitable manner, spoke lucidly on live television to the president of the then Soviet Union. He said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Mr. Gorbachev eventually did, and Germany is better off for it today. In the same spirit, I say to President Muhammadu Buhari, Mr. President, stop passing the buck to the National Assembly. Tear down this inhibiting concoction of a constitution. Tear it down. Somebody said, tear it down. I can't hear you. Tear down this inhibiting concoction of a constitution. Tear it down so that we can build a truly great nation. This is one enduring legacy your administration can still secure before your time in power draws to a close. If you do, present and unborn generations of Nigerians will remember you for it and write your name in gold when the history of this period is written. If you don't, history will record that you failed to rise to the occasion and you squandered a great opportunity. Fellow citizens, what we need is a geopolitical structure that will provide an enabling environment for every zone in our nation to maximize its geo-economic opportunities and potentials under a strong and united Nigeria. This can be achieved by a pragmatic approach to restructuring Nigeria rather than by mere zoning of the presidency. Please note that those clamoring and waiting for genuine change to happen through the upcoming 2023 presidential election without first insisting that our imposed sham of a constitution must be torn and discarded are merely putting the cart before the horse. This is nothing but a prescription for retrogression. No tangible progress can ever be made by such an exercise in futility. It will be tantamount to building a superstructure on a faulty or shaky foundation. And if any honest man, if any clean man will want to contest election on this 1999 concoction, let that man know he's about to jump into a sewage tank and he cannot come out smelling like roses. That's why there must be a change of guard in 2021. As patriots, we have presented to the current government pragmatic pathways to such a geo-economic, geo-social, and geopolitical restructuring of Nigeria. I've done it not once, not twice. However, given the lack of political will on the part of the government, the time has come for Nigerian citizens to make informed and compelling demands on the political system. The purpose of this address is to equip the citizens with the tools to do this. The power of the Nigerian citizen. Fellow Nigerians, throughout our history, from the fight for local representation in the colonial administration to the fight for the independence of Nigeria, every time there was progress on the path to nation building, it was because the people realized that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. Say that with me, the power of the people is greater than the people in power. Say it one more time, the power of the people is greater than the people in power. As nation builders, this realization of the power of the citizen was what informed our confrontational stance against military dictatorship. It was what informed every intervention in governance that we have either pioneered or supported since the return to civil rule. It was what birthed the Save Nigeria Group, SNG, amidst the turbulence of a power hijack over 11 years ago. It is what is about to awaken a new wave of intelligent engagement in the polity as we reclaim Nigeria for Nigerians and as we go to the nations to rally Nigerians in the diaspora for Nigeria. However, an active citizenry must be empowered with knowledge and understanding because you cannot engage a system whose intricacies you do not understand. I do not doubt that Nigerians are well versed in political matters. This much is evident from conversations in beer parlors, barber shops and salons, in markets, offices, churches, and mosques, on the streets, among the so-called Free Readers Association, by newspaper stands they don't buy, they read and drop. In countless WhatsApp groups, and of course on social media. However, not many Nigerians understand the intricacies of the political system and how it affects their lives and livelihoods. It is why in this address, I seek to unveil to the Nigerian citizen the intricate world of politics so that every Nigerian will have a basic understanding of the system that we are confronted with. With your permission, please journey with me as we thoroughly examine what I call the black box of Nigeria's politics. Say that with me. Say it one more time. The black box of Nigeria's politics. This segment of my address was inspired by a presentation I made to the National Association of Political Science Students, UNILAG chapter, on August the 6th, 2021. I'm extending it to the generality of the Nigerian citizenry because I'm convinced that our progress as citizens is dependent on the extent to which we can decode the complexities of our political system. The nation of the black box of politics emerges from the idea that the inner workings of the political system are opaque to the citizens. As citizens, we experience the impact of governance, whether good or bad. We know when government officials are working for the common good, and we can even opt to reward them by re-electing them. We can also assess the impact of bad governance. As a business owner, for instance, you feel the pain when your business fails due to inadequate access to infrastructure such as electricity. You also feel the drain on your savings when the dollar to naira ratio hits the roof. As a petty trader, you understand what it means to be unable to make enough sales in a day to put food on the table of your household. As a student, you know what it means to spend 6 to 8 years studying a 3 or 4 year course in an unsuitable learning environment characterized by incessant strikes and school closures amidst poor funding for education. As a young unemployed graduate, you understand what it means to be without a decent job or to be unable to access credit to finance a viable business idea. As a social media enthusiast for whom Twitter is a reliable platform for engagement, you know what it means to be unable to engage on Twitter due to the protracted ban on the platform by the federal government. You also understand what it means to be brutalized by poorly paid law enforcement agents, because sometimes, even when we react by protesting against the actions of the government, whenever the situations become unbearable, as did some of our young people during the NSAS protests around a year ago, they will brutalize them, and they were really brutalized. These unfortunate experiences are too familiar to most Nigerians. What they may not understand, however, is the behind-the-scenes political intrigues that create and sustain these situations. These intrigues and trade-offs that take place behind the scenes within the political system are what we term the black box of Nigeria's politics. I refer to it as a black box because unless you shine your eye, the more you look, the less you see. My job in this address is to remove the veil. To do this, permit me to introduce to you what I've termed the 5 concentric circles of Nigeria's politics. The 5 concentric circles of Nigeria's politics. Circle number 1, the periphery of power. At the periphery of politics in Nigeria today is electorate. The last voters register released by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, ahead of the 2019 elections gives us a breakdown of the Nigerian electorate across occupations. Listen attentively. The list includes 22.3 million students. I'm not sure Mr. President got that number of votes. 22.3 million students, 13.6 million farmers and fishers, 11.8 million housewives, 10.8 million business people, 7.6 million traders, 5 million civil servants, 4.5 million artisans, and 6 million others. The public servants and office holders who wield political power are in the minority. Total number, just over 2 million people. When compared with the rest of us as a collective bloc. What this means is that if we, the citizens of this nation, agree on a united position to salvage our nation from those who oppress us, then we can change this country and reclaim Nigeria for Nigerians. However, to understand why we have been unable to do this over the years, let us now look at the next concentric circle. Circle number 2, the gate of power. Despite the size of the Nigerian electorate, summing up to more than 84 million people, elections in Nigeria are decided not just by numbers, but by power blocks and gatekeepers whose individual and combined influence have often surpassed the voice of the electorate. These power blocks constitute the elite who stepped into the shoes of the colonialists after independence. Like the colonialists, these power blocks have mastered the art of divide and rule and have kept citizens disunited along ethnic, political, and religious lines. These 12 power blocks include, number 1, the political parties without which an individual cannot contest elections in Nigeria. Number 2, the Council of State, which I will refer to in more detail subsequently. Number 3, the Nigerian Governors Forum, whose opinions are influential on major political issues, including where the next president could come from. Number 4, the retired generals, who have retained enormous, very enormous influence on the military hierarchy. Number 5, the military, law enforcement, and intelligence agencies who wield the power of the gun, either to protect or to intimidate the electorate. Number 6, the traditional rulers, who wield substantial influence among the respective sociocultural groups and whose endorsement politicians must seek in the cause of running for office. Furthermore, the power blocks include number 7, the political dynasties and the political godfathers who influence elections and public policy within their respective domains and who also determine the direction of politics at different levels of organization, including the polling units, the wards, the state congresses, and the national congresses. Number 8, the private sector, comprised of captains of industry who maintain a political industrial complex that patronizes politicians and funds election campaigns, sometimes across political parties, in a bid to safeguard their investments. They support APC, they support PDP. You don't really know who they are not supporting. And that the two parties are two sides of the same coin is obvious. Obaseki Godwin contested on APC in his first time, he won. He contested on PDP his second time, he won. It doesn't matter. There's no ideological orientation. Number 9, the media moguls who own the major print and electronic media houses and shape public opinion with their ideological slants on the news of the day. And number 10, my constituency. Number 10, the religious leaders, including pastors, imams, and marabouts, who command a massive following and to whom politicians go for prayers, sometimes kneeling before them publicly for endorsement and fortification. Number 11, the Nigerian Labour Congress, last trade union congress, NLC and TUC, whose leadership and membership wield a considerable hold on the liver of the Nigerian economy. And number 12, foreign powers, who over the decades have continued to wield influence on domestic politics. to counteract the long-standing order. A new power bloc has recently attempted to emerge among the social media savvy and technology-empowered Nigerian youth. However, the old order has responded by clamping down on this fast-growing power bloc. My question is, for how long? Circle number 3, the corridor of power. In the context of the black box of politics, I use the phrase corridor of power metaphorically, considering the image of a building in which one encounters the corridor after passing through the gates or doors. In this context, therefore, the corridor of power is occupied by those who have access to decision-making offices after elections are concluded. To appreciate how power works in the corridor of power, we must remain mindful that in each election cycle, there are winners and losers beyond the actual candidates. Listen to me attentively. There are winners and losers beyond the actual candidates. Those among the power blocks who back candidates to win elections are equally winners, and they are guaranteed access to the corridor. They play active roles in the choice of cabinet members and in championing political and policy agendas. Unlike in developed democracies, where lobbyists have a clear-cut agenda in line with well-defined political ideologies, which could cascade into broader national interests, many of the actors in Nigeria's corridor of power are contractors, seeking patronage or currying favor for themselves or their cronies. Some policy outputs and government decisions that affect us as citizens are a result of the influence of these persons on the political agenda within the black box of the political system. Circle number 4. We are getting close. The room of power. Beyond the corridor is a room of power, a center of deliberations and decisions. Being in the room is being in a position to make or influence policy directly. To understand the power of the room, picture the boardroom in a corporate organization, a room in which the board of directors of the organization meets regularly. For ease of understanding, in the context of the political arena, in place of the board of directors, you may call the occupants of the room the cabinet. These are persons who are appointed as heads of ministries, departments, and agencies, MDAs. In many cases, they are the nominees or beneficiaries of the winners among the power blocks and gatekeepers. In return, they keep the room open to their benefactors so that the interests of the latter are protected in the decision-making process. Beyond the general chamber of the room is an inner chamber known as the kitchen cabinet, comprised of a few individuals who are the final stops to the seat of power. They are those you refer to as the cabal. Some of them may be unofficial advisors, but their perspectives can override those of the official cabinet. I will leave you to guess who these are in Nigeria's current political dispensation. The 5th circle, the seat of power. The final concentric circle is the seat of power, occupied by a decision maker who could either be the president at the federal level, the governor at the state level, or the chairman of a local government area at the local level. The degree to which the legislature and judiciary can perform oversight and adjudicative functions respectively determines the extent to which the seat of power is subject to checks and balances. It is said that the Nigerian president is the most powerful president among the world's democracies because of the immense powers vested in the president by the Nigerian Constitution 1999. These powers effectively give the president control over the judiciary because of such constitutional provisions as the listing of the National Judicial Council, NJC, and the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, as executive bodies whose heads the president has the power to appoint. Your guess is as good as mine. He who pays the piper dictates the tune. These are some of the anomalies in our present structure. Surrounding the seat of power is a component of the Nigerian political system that is worthy of note, namely the Council of State, which I earlier alluded to as a power block. This includes the president, the vice president, all former presidents and heads of state, all former chief justices of Nigeria, the president of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the governors of the 36 states, and the Attorney General of the Federation. The Council of State advises the president and as such wields influence on the direction of state policy. That's when they sit. The happenings at the gate of power, the corridor of power, the room of power, and the seat of power are what constitute the black box of Nigeria's politics. It is within this system that the fate of our citizens has been decided over the decades. The challenge before us as nation builders is to reposition the periphery of power to the center of governance so that the office of the citizen becomes as distinguished, if not more distinguished, than the office of the president. This mandate to restore dignity to the Nigerian people is what has informed a strategic intervention in governance through the years across platforms from the pulpit to the podium. In doing this, we have leveraged our God-given access to not just the corridor of power, but the room of power, and indeed the seat of power, making governance recommendations in the interest of the Nigerian people. However, I have since realized that access to the room, as good as it is not as effective in achieving this mandate as being in the room. Because there are those within the room whose stock in the trade is to misinform and mislead the occupants of the seat of power. Hence, framework after framework, proposal after proposal, much of our attempts to facilitate good governance in the interest of the Nigerian people have been met with opposition. It appears that once we have made our case in the interest of Nigeria and left the room, certain characters around the seat of power step in to counter opposition in their selfish interests or the parochial interests of their benefactors among the power blocks. This is why we must all be committed to redeeming the seat of power and fostering the emergence of the best, the brightest, the fittest, and the most competent across the governance ecosystem so that the black box of politics will become the lighthouse of good governance. However, to make this happen, citizens' participation is imperative. I'm reminded of the words of Jean-Jacques Rousseau in The Social Contract. He said, and I quote, "As soon as any man says of the affairs of the state, what does it matter to me? The state may be given up for lost." I also am reminded of the age-long words attributed to Plato. The penalty good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. As powerful as the power blocks are, and as impenetrable as the gates of power appear to be, the real reason for the marginalization of the Nigerian citizen in the affairs of our nation is the inadequate participation in the governance process by the citizens themselves. A crucial aspect of poor citizen participation is the low voter turnout that has defined Nigeria's democratic experience despite the significant budgetary allocations to elections. According to INEC, over the last 2 electoral cycles, including off-season elections, voter turnout across the country hovers around 30 to 35%. While a few elections had higher percentages, some recent by-elections recorded as low as 8.3% voter turnout in an urban constituency of over 1.2 million registered voters located in the nation's most densely populated city. This unfavorably compares to the average voter turnout of 65 to 70% in other countries, even in the West African region. Fellow Nigerians, to build a great nation that works for every Nigerian, this trend must be reversed, and we are poised to reverse it as God enables us so to do. Therefore, the concluding part of this address is dedicated to activating 10 key citizen power hubs that can positively transform the political landscape ahead of the next elections. Activating the 10 power hubs of citizen participation is a key objective, the key assignment that the Nigerian for Nigeria movement will, by God's grace, carry out. Power hub number 1, the household. The change we advocate must begin from the family, or in social economic terms, the household. I therefore call on Nigerian households to ensure full participation of members who have attained the voting age in the ongoing continuous voter registration exercise. While this responsibility falls on husbands and wives alike, women in particular have an important role to play. After all, the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Therefore, homemakers in our nation must become nation builders. In the INEC electorate profile, I earlier presented, housewives constituted the third largest block of potential voters among the Nigerian electorate. I'm reminded of the remarkable roles played by women in the movements that brought corporate independence for Nigeria. The notable leaders of some of these movements, including Mrs. Funmilayo Ransom Kuti and Mrs. Margaret Epo, tactically deployed fellow women, including housewives, in driving political change, sometimes forcing husbands to allow their wives to join their movements. These women would deal a heavy blow to the institutions of colonialism long before the battle for independence gained momentum. I'm also reminded of Jael, the heroic housewife in the Bible in the book of Judges chapter 5, who became famous for overpowering Sisera, the enemy of our nation, thereby ending decades of oppression right from the comfort of our home. Finally, just 3 weeks ago, there were reports of housewives protesting a 7-year power outage in 2 communities in Kano. It's just the beginning. It's going to gain ascendancy in the days to come. As we advocate a massive voter turnout during the next elections, I enjoin the great women of this nation to refuse to sell their votes to crafty politicians for a loaf of bread or bag of rice. You deserve much more than crumbs from the table. You deserve seats at the table in the room of power. The destinies of our nation and our children depend on the power of your vote. Think deep and vote wisely. The second power of the market. Closely linked to the household is the market, which represents the convergence of farmers, fishers, market women, petty traders, artisans, and micro enterprises. These stakeholders at the base of our economy, often referred to as the informal sector, are estimated to constitute up to 65% of the Nigerian economy. I call on these grassroots influencers to recognize that they deserve a Nigeria that works for them. They must reject the offers of stomach infrastructure and demand the provision of critical infrastructure, such as roads, electricity, and market facilities that will enhance their businesses and boost their productivity. Power hub number 3, the village square. The village square represents the convergence of community dwellers. In rural areas, This is the literal village square where elders and age grades deliberate. In urban areas, the village square represents the community development associations, town union meetings, and the landlords and resident associations of the various streets and estates. Not only must these structures become centers of community organizing for citizen participation, they must also refuse to collude with wicked politicians to rig elections. Power hub number 4, the street. Closely associated with the market is the street. The strategy of the power blocks and those in the corridors of power has been to capture and control the streets. Because in Nigeria's current political architecture, the game of politics is won by the man or woman who controls the streets.